live event with you coming up this summer. So for all you San Diegans, there may be an opportunity to see Kimmery live depending on what the world looks like in July. So keep posted on that. Warwick's is open for online 24/7. You can order books from us. You can call us at the store starting at 9 a.m. Monday through Saturday until about 4. You can do curbside pickup. You can buy Kimmery's first book, second book, and Liz and Lisa's books. We couldn't do this without all of you. I'm seeing lots of regular faces that come into this room every time we do one of these. So thank all of you for repeat visiting. I will now hand it, and Marilee, I see you there. You're gonna have to show your needlepoint one of these times because I see you doing it. That's the personal fun stuff about this Zoom living stuff. So anyways, guys, have a great conversation. And Kimmery and Liz and Lisa, thank you.
Well, thanks again, Julie, and don't forget to post those buy links in the chat so you guys remember to support your local independent bookstore. So we are so excited to have our friend and author, wonderful author, Kimmery Martin here today. We love Kimmery. She is an emergency medicine doctor turned novelist whose works of medical fiction have been praised by the Harvard Crimson, Southern Living, the Charlotte Observer, and the New York Times, among others. A lifelong literary nerd, she promotes reading, interviews authors, and teaches writing seminars. She's a frequent speaker at libraries, conferences, and bookstores around the United States. Kimmery completed her medical training at the University of Louisville School of Medicine and Vanderbilt University School of Medicine. She lives with her husband and 3 children in Charlotte, North Carolina. Her second novel, The Antidote for Everything, is out now. So Lisa, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. Hi, Kimmery. Booklist had this to say about The Antidote for Everything. Martin's trademark witty repartee makes her characters fun to be with, and she both entertains and tackles thought-provoking questions of honor and integrity in a world where facts matter little. Tell us what it's about.
Okay, thank you, first of all, Warwick's and Liz and Lisa. I'm so happy to be here. I've been telling everybody that I'm going to be in Southern California tonight, sadly.
I saw that.
Here in North Carolina. So The Antidote for Everything, my second novel, is medical fiction. And interestingly, my contract with my publisher actually requires me to write medical fiction where the protagonist is a female doctor. So it gets kind of niche-y, but that is the world that I know the best. And The Antidote for Everything is a little bit of a spin-off novel from my first book. So one of the very minor characters in The Queen of Hearts was a woman named Georgia, who is a urologist in Charleston. And the novel centers on this friendship between her and her closest friend, a man named Jonah, who is a family practice doctor, family medicine doctor in the same big clinic that she's in. And as the novel opens, the two of them realize that something sort of strange is going on with Jonah's patients. They aren't showing up for appointments. And ultimately, he realizes that the clinic where he works has instructed them not to come back. So he's given this ultimatum that he has to stop treating certain patients. And in this case, it's his LGBTQ patients, or he can no longer work at the clinic. So he's given this ultimatum and he refuses it and he's fired. So that's kind of the setup for the novel.
Well, I read that it's based on a real life story of something that happened to a friend of yours. So I'm curious about that. And then if actual events inspire all of your novels.
Well, that's a question I got a lot with the first book. And I actually addressed it in my author's note where I said, you know, if you're one of those people who believe that all fiction is autobiographical, then you need to skip chapters 9, 14, 18. But I do think actually that, in my case at least, that part of my fiction is somewhat autobiographical. I think all authors, and you guys know better than me, I think all authors use the experiences in their lifetime to inform their material to some degree, and then you fictionalize it, or you make an amalgam out of characters, or some of it's just purely invented. And in the case of The Antidote for Everything, it was inspired by real life events. I don't want to say too much about that because I don't want to break a confidence, but I do have a colleague who was fired after refusing to stop treating transgender patients, which she was instructed to do.
Wow. Great. Well, I have to say that it is a great book and I really enjoyed reading it. So I can't wait for everyone else here to read it if you haven't already. You are, in your own words, a lapsed ER doctor. What does that mean exactly? Are you still working as a doctor? And can you tell us what made you want to switch from that to writing? Two very different careers.
Well, I consider myself to be incredibly blessed to have had these two careers that I've loved so much. And, you know, one clearly is writing. The other is the practice of medicine. So I'm an ER doctor. And I have always loved the field. I like the camaraderie of it and the procedures and the technical challenges and diagnostic puzzles and all of that stuff. But I've had this secret longing for most of my life to write a novel. And I think that stems from my immense love of reading, because my entire life I've been a really devoted book nerd. So I guess about 6 years ago, I sat down and started writing. And the book that I started writing became The Queen of Hearts. And as I was working on it, I became completely obsessed with the process of writing. I was waking up at night dreaming about this book. I was pulling over to the side of the road to write things down. It took over my life and I started messing up everything else. Basically, you know, I was forgetting to feed the kids and not picking people up on time and juggling it all poorly. And I had a very serendipitous job offer from a man at my church who was the practice manager of a allergy clinic in downtown Charlotte, which is all big skyscrapers and banks. So they wanted an ER doctor on site in case anyone had an anaphylactic reaction to their shots. So I was basically being paid to sit in a little room with nothing else to do the vast majority of the time. And so I finished my novel and sold it and shifted more into this very easy office job. So I haven't worked in the ER in about 4 years. I did just sign up with the state of North Carolina to go back if I'm needed. So if COVID becomes overwhelming here, then I'll be back in the ER for the duration of however long that lasts.
I was going to ask you about that, just what it's been like for you to watch all these doctors and nurses on the front lines and read these stories about them. I mean, you could have been in there every day dealing with this. I was just curious what you've been thinking about that as you've been watching.
Well, I'm in a lot of online medical groups, particularly on Facebook, but some other ones as well. And so I'm seeing just this barrage of daily posts from my ER colleagues around the country and around the world. And it is completely overwhelming for many of them. And it's such a absolute deluge of information too. You know, we're learning every single day more about the characteristics of this virus, and just the sheer amount of information, both personal and medical and scientific, that is being hurled at these physicians is stunning. So it has been really hard to watch what a lot of them are going through. You know, I feel guilty in a way that I'm not right there with them right now, but my community has been really lucky. We've had a very good flattening the curve experience so far here in Charlotte. I do worry about fall.
Right. Well, you're signed up to help if you need to, so that's great. Back to your book. So the title, curious how you came up with that and if it's the original title or if the title changed.
Do y'all get to pick your titles, the two of you?
Usually, well, if it's a good one.
Yeah.
If not, no.
Well, I had a hard time picking this one. So my first book, they changed the title that I had, which is very common in the publishing industry to do that. It was originally Trauma Queen, One of the protagonists is a trauma surgeon, and the other is a cardiologist, and they changed it to the Queen of Hearts. For this one, I think we went through about 20 title brainstorming sessions, my editor and I, and just nothing was coming to either one of us. And then I like to title my chapters in my books, and I have a lot of fun with that. So I was fooling around with a chapter in the book, and I think I had one of the characters say something about the antidote for everything. And I thought, well, that would make a pretty good title for this book, because they do ultimately decide what they believe the antidote for everything to be. And I'm curious if people, once they've read it, agree with the characters or not. It's not what you think.
Well, I'm told there's some questions coming in, so we should probably give you guys a chance to ask.
And I love that title. I love both your titles.
Yeah.
So do good
I
work.
like the original title though for your other book too. I mean, I like Queen of Hearts, but I like Trauma Queen too.
I thought it was kind of funny. They didn't want
like
in the title.
Trauma Queen. Yeah, I like it.
I think you can't go wrong with either of them. Okay, so we've got some questions and comments from the audience. So Jeannie saying, Kimmery, so great to be able to attend one of your book events. So welcome. And Amanda is asking a question related to Lisa's question. What do you think the likelihood of you being called to report to an ER? And then I'm just going to give you the other question too, because they're kind of related, if that's okay, from Susan. She said, what made you choose to be an ER doctor rather than another medical specialty? I think you can kind of probably lump those together.
Yeah. Right now, I think the odds of me going in are low because our hospitals are not overwhelmed. My bigger concern is for the fall and winter when flu season coincides with what presumably might be a second wave of COVID. And I think there's a decent likelihood that I will be called in at that point. I hope not, but I think that may happen. And then why did I become an ER doctor? Well, I didn't start out in emergency medicine. I actually started out in general surgery. And I did a year of internship in Charlotte, which is how I wound up here. Met my husband that year. And for those of you who have read The Queen of Hearts, I'm going to tell you a little secret. My husband was my chief resident for a month when I was on the orthopedic service.
Oh, scandalous. Love it.
I smell a memoir in your future.
It all worked out in the end, though. So I decided to switch in my intern year for a couple different reasons. A little bit of it was lifestyles. General surgeons have a very difficult lifestyle. Part of it was that I had a little bit of a hand tremor that I've always had, but it worried me that it would progress as I aged and maybe eventually force me out of my specialty, which didn't happen. So there are a couple factors going into that, but I really loved general surgery. And I do really love ER. I mean, I think I just like the pace of it and the fact that you see literally everything. And it appeals to me to be able to make an immediate impact in the life of another human being at what is presumably one of the worst times of their lives in a lot of situations. I guess I find it a blessing and gratifying to be able to help someone when they're suffering, although sometimes that leads to a lot of drama and sadness, but I just like the challenges, I guess.
That's awesome. I'm going to ask a question really quick. This is a little bit off topic, but Lisa's going to laugh. So I watch a lot of medical dramas and it's always general surgeons. Do you ever watch any of them? And are they totally unrealistic?
So everybody told me my first novel was like Grey's Anatomy in book form. Yeah. I have never seen it, ever. I don't know. I guess I've seen a few episodes of House, and that's it. So I'm not a good person to ask.
Fine, I'll have to ask someone else. All right, Lisa, I'm gonna throw it back to you.
Okay. So the cover, same question as the title. I'm curious. Always curious about covers because it's a great cover. Was it always the cover? Did you go through a lot of different covers, and what was your input on it?
Have I not told you guys my cover story? Okay, I have
I know it. Yeah, but it's a good one. Tell it. Tell
Yeah.
it.
Let me see.
I did not find this answer in my deep dive today, so
Okay.
I'm excited to hear.
I should have a copy of my book, but I don't. So here's the cover of the first book. Sorry,
Yeah.
I know that's hard to see. So as I mentioned, the protagonist of The Queen of Hearts is a cardiologist, and authors don't get to typically pick their covers, right? Sometimes if you're famous and important, you get a lot of input, but in my case, I was an unknown and I got basically 0, although they did ask me if I had a request, and I said I wanted a vintage looking anatomic drawing of a heart to reflect the medical specialty of the protagonist. So the publisher did not want a naked heart on the cover. So they put this mixture of flowers that they told me was partly celebratory and partly funereal to illustrate the circle of life in a medical practice. And there are some birds and bees in this picture, if you look closely. And the background color is like scrubs. And it was a really beautiful, artistic, unique cover, I thought. We did an Instagram reveal. People loved it. And then I was in New York about 3 months before the book came out. And my editor called me into her office and she said, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but we have to change the cover. And I was crushed. You know, we already showed it to all these people and they like it. And, you know, why? So I can't say this next part too explicitly, but there was a certain fiction buyer for a certain chain bookstore who didn't like the cover and she wasn't going to order any if they didn't change it. So they showed me the new cover and it was a field of flowers. And there was a prescription pad just sort of floating in the breeze above the field. And in red cursive, it said The Queen of Hearts. And she looked at me and I said, barf, you know, I hate this.
Yeah.
Can we change it?
Horrible.
So they changed it again. It was a cartoon doctor with holding up an x-ray of a heart like this. And she had little heart lips. It was cute, but kind of derivative. And I didn't like that, but they went with it. And then the fiction buyer didn't like that either, so they went back to the original cover. And it wound up being hugely successful. It was on all the best cover lists of 2018, and it was so beloved on Instagram that they decided for the second book, they were going to continue this concept of having the cover art reflect the medical specialty of the protagonist. And I said, well, y'all know my next book is about a urologist, right? Thank you for laughing, because here's the awkward thing about doing a video talk. Tell a joke, and if everyone is muted, you get silence. And I always respond to that by going, you know, I can't tell if anyone's laughing.
I see faces laughing. I have it on the
that was
gallery view. Yeah.
So I was really curious. What are we going to do for the antidote for everything? And this graphic designer is just a genius. She's so talented. I love what she did with it. You know, it's a little bit, you know, sexually suggestive, a little bit urology suggestive, a little straight up beautiful. I think she did an amazing job.
Well,
It's
I
a
also
great
would tell
cover.
you, Deborah in the chat also gave you a ha 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 ha. She wrote it out for you.
Oh, that's a lot of ha's.
Yeah.
Thank you.
To make you feel better. People
Well,
are
that
laughing.
leads perfectly into my next question about humor. We couldn't have set this up better if we tried. I read that the book was originally going to involve a brain tumor, but the publisher thought that'd be too grim, and you said, but I can make a brain tumor funny. And so they guided it in a different direction, but the book is still funny. I mean, you're funny, it comes out. And so I'm curious, like, why is humor important to you, especially in these types of books?
I think because it's what I gravitate to as a reader myself. I really enjoy authors that are just a tiny bit smartass, you know, a little bit snarky, who use wordplay a lot, wittiness, cleverness. I will not say that I do that as successfully as my idols do, but that is my aspiration because that is what I enjoy. And I think, you know, life is like that. It's always a mixture of sweetness and sorrow and poignancy and humor. And it would be really bad to not have that in your life. And some fiction doesn't lend itself to that. And I enjoy those reads too, the really sad, heart-gripping, emotive ones. But it's just what I like the best in books myself.
I think Lisa and I
yeah.
mean, even we've both, I think we both in dark times go to humor too. And I would think, you know, especially as a medical, like, yeah, I think you'd almost need that to persevere in that environment. We have a question here. Holly's asking, because you are a medical professional, how do you write your books in an approachable way for non-medical readers?
That's a great question. You know, people are going to be all over the map on whether or not I am successful in that regard. But I tend to give my readers a lot of credit that they will infer things from context, because obviously not everybody, you know, is familiar with the term pancreatic duodenectomy or whatever it is. But and hey, I'm sorry to the people that had the actresses that have to voice my books. But yeah, I think you know, the thing that I enjoy a lot in many kinds of fiction is when you're completely immersed in a world the characters know well. When it's not your world, you know, I like reading books set in the financial world, for example, or some industry or setting that I don't know that well. And so yeah, I think you kind of pick things up from context. I sometimes will straight up have the characters explain things, and sometimes the omniscient narrator does it, and sometimes it's just left for you to figure out. But I don't try to dumb it down.
Awesome. Lisa, back to you.
Okay, back to me.
Yeah, back to you.
Well, tell us. I'm always curious. I ask everyone, all the authors, this because I'm curious about this, and I think readers are too. What is your writing process? Do you outline? Do you just fly by the seat of your pants? Do you write every day? Do you have a schedule? That may be different right now, and you can tell us about that too. But
so, as you know, I think a lot of authors divide themselves into the plotter and pantser camps, the outliners versus the seat of your pants people. And I'm definitely a seat of your pants person, and I'm trying really hard not to be, because that is not an efficient way to write. It leads to a need for massive revision in my case. But I find it really difficult to plot. I have read all of those books on writing where they, you know, give clever titles to each section of the book and tell you at what percentage point certain plot points should turn. And I freak out completely and slam those books shut because it makes no sense to me. So I think it's an intuitive process for writers, and you just are what you are. That being said, I'm trying to get better, especially for my long-suffering editor, at plotting.
what about your, how often do you write? And how long does it take you to write a book? Can you give us more details on the behind the scenes of Kimmery Martin?
Well, I'm better in the morning. By the afternoon, I'm fried, and all my kids are fried, and everything is, you know, all hell's breaking loose, to use a term you're not supposed to use in fiction.
Right.
But all hell breaks loose around here every afternoon, and so I try to get it done in the mornings. I was in a very prolonged dry spell at the start of this whole homeschooling thing. You know, I wasn't getting anything done. All of us were home, my husband too, and then in the last 2 weeks, I've written over 22,000 words on the book that I progress now. So I just hit a stride, and like, it's that really good feeling where, again, you're dreaming about it, you're thinking about it all the time. And sometimes I'm in that, and sometimes I'm not. And right now I am.
Well, is that because of what the next book's about? Have you been inspired, or like, I'm just curious, where were you with the book when we all started sheltering in place, and did you make changes? And you'll have to tell everybody what's about, though, before you answer that.
Yeah, so I've been working on this book for about a year, and I started with a really intensive period of research. I read all of these books behind me. I interviewed people at the CDC and the WHO. You see where this is going? So my publisher is pitching the next book as a cross between Sophie's Choice and The Hot Zone. So it's about an infectious disease doctor whose 2 children both become deathly ill during a brand new worldwide viral pandemic. and she has access to 1 dose of an experimental antiviral medication. She has to decide which child gets it. So that was the original plot of the book.
Wow.
And so I was maybe halfway done with it this February, or, you know, whenever I was on the very first part of my book tour for the Antidote for Everything, and I was telling, you know, I was elbow bumping everybody because I'd been immersed in this virology research for a year, and making, you know, so early on I was making jokes about, hey, I hope this doesn't really happen. You know, so now people are begging me not to write about alien invasions and So yeah, it's changed. It has changed considerably. My publisher asked me, first of all, to rewrite it from the perspective of a group of female physicians during the pandemic. So I've got a character that's an ER doctor in New York City. I've got a character who's an OBGYN in California, in San Diego, as a matter of fact, so I might have to pick your brains a little bit. There's one who's in Kentucky, one who's with the CDC in Atlanta. So I had to add in, you know, these other perspectives, and so that meant rewriting a giant hunk of the book. And then my original virus was a really bad mutated form of flu. I was, like many physicians, terrified of a repeat of 1918, the influenza outbreak that now everyone basically has heard about, but not everyone had heard about it then. But I've since changed my virus to be a fictional one. I don't want to confuse anyone about what's real and what's not real once the book comes out. So that was a big change. There have been plenty of inspiring moments in the last couple of months that I have used. And, you know, it's a little bit of a gamble. I'm not sure that anyone's going to want to read this. You know, I originally meant it as a cautionary tale. And now nobody needs a, you know, this could really happen book. So I've had to restructure that, and I don't know whether there'll be an appetite for it or not.
It's just
Sounds really,
yeah, it does. I'm not actually knowing what you're going to say, and
I know. Well, I have a question for you. Do you know what it is, Lisa? Can I beam it?
No, it's my mental telepathy is not working right now.
Sorry. My question is this: you talked about you changed it from one perspective to several different women's perspective, and I'm just curious. As an author, are you doing that in third person? Are you doing that in first person? Are you switching back and forth between your narratives? Because, you know, what you said, it's 4 main characters now, these 4 women.
There's 3 points of view now, and then there's 7 characters altogether. So it got a little complicated. Yeah. Well, I struggle with that. I don't know if y'all do. I often do this when I write. I'll write it in first person, and then I'll change it to third person, and then I'll change it back to first person. You know, it takes me to get a feel for which voice I want to write in, and even which tense. So what I wound up doing with this book is it starts in first person present tense with one of the characters looking back on the pandemic after it's over. And then I slip into third person for the majority of the book. So it starts after the pandemic, then it goes to before and during, and then it goes at the very end back to after. So the majority of it is written in the third person past tense now.
I like that, and I actually like when authors switch around like their narratives. Maybe one character's in first and one's in third, or whatnot. We do have a question, 2 questions actually. The first is, what is the cover artist's name? From Susan. She said they're beautiful, both covers, and I don't know our cover artist's name, so do you know yours?
Her name is Colleen. She's with Penguin Random House. I'm blanking on her last name. I'll think of it and tell you. I think she's brilliant.
Yeah, she is. And then Jeannie's asking, when you write about a specialty that isn't your own, how much medical research does that require?
In this case, a lot. So I read all these books on virology and infectious disease and the history of pandemics. And then I started interviewing people. So I mentioned that I'm in a bunch of female doctor Facebook groups, and 2 or 3 of them are all infectious disease doctors or epidemiologists. And I was talking to them a lot before COVID, and then I have, you know, wisely decided not to pester them at this time. But I tend to get, I usually get beta readers in whatever specialty I'm writing about. So for urology, that was a lot of fun with this book. I had a big group of female urologists that I crowdsourced, and they are so freaking funny. You know, you do not, my character even says this, you do not become a female urologist without a strong sense of humor. And yeah, so I had a lot of fun with them reading the book, and I'm doing the same thing now with infectious disease doctors and OBGYNs and ER I know pretty well.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
agree with
my
you.
dog keeps coming in and out.
I agree with you about urologists. I actually was a pharmaceutical rep for a long time, and oh, hey, Lisa's dog. Hey,
Yeah,
Nathan.
he's just walking in and out. It's like, sorry, everyone.
And I called on urologists for 4 years, and they all have an interesting sense of humor, and particularly the women there, they're fascinating. So I'm sure that's a fun group. Lisa, that's all I have in the chat. I'm gonna give it back to you.
Okay, well, my dog would like to ask you. I'm just kidding. So my next question's about reading, and if you've been able to do so during this quarantine, and if you have any books that you would recommend.
Oh yes, I do. I have been on a real reading streak too. So I think sometimes my writing and my reading streaks coincide. I get fired up when I read something I like. So I recently read a book by a woman from my very own tiny hometown in Kentucky. The book is called The 10,000 Doors of January. And it's actually fantasy, but it is so incredibly well written, and it has won every accolade out there. I see you nodding, Julie. Have you read it? So good. Yeah, so she's from Berea, just like me, the author of that book. I don't think I have it here. I was going to show you. Oh, I do.
I love that. Oh, I muted myself.
No, I can hear you. I can hear you, Lisa.
What it looks
Ooh, that cover is amazing. Okay, I'm getting that. I'm gonna order that from Warwick's.
Some reason I was muted. I'm sorry. I love the title.
Julie, you should put that link up in the chat if you're able for this book, in case anybody wants to buy it.
Will do. Yeah, no, it's so good, Kimmery. It's really good. It's
I'm
good.
sold.
Good recommendation.
I mean, it's the kind of book that makes authors just writhe with envy. I will never write that well. I just read November Road. What's that author's name? Lou Berney.
Lou Berney.
Lou Berney.
Mm-hmm.
That was great. It's the story of this mobbed up hitman in the 1960s, right around the time of the Kennedy assassination, and how his life coincides with this woman on the run. And it's really good. I enjoyed that a lot. I'm the world's biggest Bill Bryson fan, so I read The Body, A Guide for Occupants. Every word that man writes is genius, in my opinion. He's so smart and clever and interesting, and I learned things I didn't know about physiology and anatomy and the history of medicine. Yeah, so those have probably been 3 of my favorites recently. Family Trust by Kathy Wang, another great in-depth dive into an industry. This one is like the finance aspects of Silicon Valley, if you're interested in that. But those are a few of my favorites right now.
My husband just read November Road, and it's on my TBR too. He loved it. That's a great book.
You know, I did just read, I don't know what you think about this, Julie. I just read this and I was kind of surprised by it. This is a pandemic book. Guy had a lot of prescient, you know, I guess.
Is it as big as it looks? Like, how many pages is that? It looked enormous, but I don't know if it's how you put it into the.
It's 375. It's not. You know, it's a very, there's a lot of what authors would call information dumping in it, you know, just sections and sections and sections where he's just telling you stuff. But it is interesting because he actually goes into some real life scenarios related to pandemics. And
my understanding is he got some things right about what's happened so far, and what he projects out is a little frightening. So he's the one that wrote The Looming Tower. So his writing is fantastic.
So I was going to make my pandemic be the worst possible thing that could happen, you know, and if you were trying to invent a virus, you would make it airborne. You know, COVID is transmitted in respiratory droplets. It's not truly airborne. you would make it have a really, really long lag time between exposure and symptoms so that it's harder for people to do contact tracing, quarantining. You would make it have a high lethality rate, but not so high that it burns out right away. It would cross the blood-brain barrier, and there's this whole list of things that my virology infectious disease friends told me they would not want to see in a virus. He puts a lot of them into this virus.
Got it.
Well, I don't know if I'm ready for that one right now. Maybe down the road. I've only been able to read really light books as of late, but I'm hoping to get back into some of my grittier stuff eventually. I have one more question, and I love this because I have a similar experience. So I read that your dad used to take you to bookstore every year and told you could have whatever you wanted. And my dad did the same exact thing. And that is a great memory of mine and definitely shaped my love of reading and writing. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that? And if you're doing the same thing with your kids?
I do like to talk about that. So as I mentioned, I grew up in the mountains outside a small town called Berea, Kentucky, a fairly rural place. And we were big library users. So my mother would take me in a red wagon to the library in the closest town once a week and literally filled it up every week with books, so that I eventually read every book in the children's library. And I went on to read just about every single fiction book in the adult library and a lot of the nonfiction books as well. And it turned me into an information junkie and a lifelong reader. And I think that informed both of my career choices, medicine and fiction writing. And so my dad, for our special day every year on my birthday, he would take me to Lexington, Kentucky, and we would go to the bookstore there, which was called Joseph Beth, and it was enormous, this 2-story palatial structure full of every possible book I could have wanted, and he would let me go to town. And that was truly just such a formative experience in my childhood. It was better than Disneyland for me, getting to go to a bookstore and get what I wanted. And so, yeah, I do that with my children. They live in a completely different era where, things just appear and, it's not as magical for them. So right from the time they were born, I started reading to them every single night, every kid, every single night. And, it would be truly heartbreaking to me if my kids didn't develop a love of literature and a love of reading. I'm truly grateful to bookstores and to libraries for that reason. I thank all of you for supporting your own local bookstore, especially if you happen to live in San Diego. Even if you don't, you can order from Warwick's. I think that it's such a testament to our society that we value literature and that we value books, and that every time you open a book, you're seeing the world through another person's eyes. That makes you a more empathetic human being as well as a more knowledgeable one. So yeah, thank you all for reading.
I couldn't agree more. Frances has a question. Do you anticipate a future novel incorporating a few or all of the protagonists having a reunion or a crossover event?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, in the novel that I'm writing now, all of the main characters from the first book and the second book make cameos. So Zadie and Emma from The Queen of Hearts are in this one, just as a mention. Georgia and Jonah are in it, and they actually have a more significant role. And so I actually did write a scene where all of these characters are having a Zoom.
Cool. That's awesome.
That's something that the entire world is now familiar with.
Right. Amazing. We're so happy you could join us today. Can you tell everyone where we can find you on social media?
Yeah, I like Instagram, so I'm Kimmery Martin. I'm on Facebook and Twitter a little bit, and I have a website, kimmerymartin.com, and I do put my own book recommendations, reviews, and sometimes even author interviews on there, which, by the way, I really need to interview you guys if you're ever free.
We're in, girl.
Let me check my schedule. Oh, I'm free.
For everyone, you can find Lisa and I at Instagram at Lisa and Liz, at Facebook, Liz Fenton and Lisa Steinke, and our website, lizandlisa.com. If you go there and go to the events page, or lizandlisa.com/events, we have all the upcoming events. And oh my gosh, we'll be putting out the whole schedule next week, but wait till you see June. We've got so many amazing authors. Coming up next week, we have Wendy Francis. And then after that, we have Frances May, who is the author of Under the Tuscan Sun, which is one of my like all-time favorite books. So we hope that you'll join us. But I mean, when you guys see this schedule in June, you're gonna freak out. We've got in such a diverse, such diversity in the schedule as well. So there'll be something for everybody. I want to thank Kimmery. Thank you so much for taking the time to come chat with us. And of course, we have to always end with the Queen, Julie from Warwick. Give one more shout out. Tell everybody where they can buy these books.
Queen of Hearts, Queen of Books, right? There we go. Well, again, thank you guys. Liz and Lisa, you guys do a tremendous job of this, and you gals are wonderful, and thank you for doing it. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen watching, you can get their books at our store too. Kimmery, I think you need to own a bookstore. Your book recommendations and the way you talk about books is pretty spot on. So that might be another career that you can have. Hopefully we'll see you in July, if at some point. So if ladies who live in San Diego, there might be an opportunity that Kimmery will be with us in July. So stay tuned for that. We do have a wonderful website that you can buy books from. You can call us, pick up curbside. We'll ship it to you. So thank you, everybody, warwicks.com, and we'll see everybody next week. Thank you all.
Yep. See you guys next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.